Hello there, everybody. This is Jay Frost speaking to you from, of course, my podcast studio here at the Philanthropy Mastermind series. And today, I'm not only your host, but I'm your humble presenter in our How to Raise series, which is a CFRE accredited series. So if you're here with us live, welcome. And if you're watching this afterwards, welcome to you as well. You can pick up CFRE credits if you are collecting those towards your CFRE accreditation by attending these shows. We have plenty of them over at the website of our very generous sponsor, DonorSearch, which has been sponsoring this series since back in 2016. So I think if my calculation is correct, this is episode 745. Lots of content there at DonorSearch under the resources tab, as well as under the their YouTube channel. So take a look for all of that if you're collecting those credits, or if you're just interested in this series. All of our shows, at least for the past 2 years, are there. So we welcome you to that. And I want to welcome all of you who are here with us live. I'm seeing a lot of it in the chat today. So I'll just do a quick number of shout outs because it's always fun to see where people are dialing in from. We aren't dialing, I know that's true. But anyway, Pittsburgh and Montana and Richmond, which is not too far away from me, or our producer, Jack, who's here in the background. From New York, great. And of course, Cape Cod and Boca Raton, Clarksville, Cleveland. So far, I haven't mispronounced any of these cities. Buffalo, Milwaukee, Columbus, Washington, D.C., which is exactly 25 miles from where I am coming to you right now, Dallas and Birmingham, and from Miami. It's great to see all of you here. I don't see any international voices today, but I'm sure we'll have a few join us in the crowd because this topic is, of course, very much a global one. AI is impacting all of us in lots of ways that are both fun and frightening. We'll talk about both of those things today from a very practical lens, because today's session, of course, is practical magic. I said 26 actionable tips for using AI at your nonprofit. That's not exactly right. There are probably more than that here. And I will also have a handout that I'll send to everybody after the fact that has links to a lot of the stuff that I'll be sharing in the slides. And for all of those who are here live, you'll be happy to know that a copy of this recording, as well as a copy of the slide deck, will be coming to you via email in the next couple of days. So be on the lookout for that, if you will. And if you don't see it come to you, check your spam filter. Plus, you can always send me an email. My email address here at the Philanthropy Mastermind series is simply that's Jay, at DonorSearch.net. That will also be in the chat, so you can check that out and always write to me. And it's good to see someone here from Saskatchewan. So we do have international representation today in our chat. So thank you all very much for that. It's good to see you all here. And Jack just listed my email address there in the chat. You can also find me at LinkedIn. Now, what are we going to be talking about today? Once again, this idea about AI and your nonprofit. And this is very broad. So there'll be lots of things that relate directly to fundraising, but some things that are more along the lines of communications and other things that are pretty important in the work that we do at nonprofits every single day. I will not pretend, however, that I'm the oracle on anything. I am an observer, probably just like you. And that means I want to gain from you as much as I want to share with you today. Please use the chat for that, both to share with me and with Jack, but also with one another, so that we can learn the sites that are most beneficial to you. It's also a great place to answer some of the questions I'll be posing in a moment. And you can also ask questions in the Q&A, and I'll try to answer those throughout the presentation today. I'm going to be sharing a lot with you, so I'll go kind of quickly and do work with me as I try to work with you in the chat and the Q&A to make sure that you're part of this conversation on something that impacts all of us so very much. So I'm going to jump right in and share my screen. And I'll have to jump back and forth in the sharing today, so bear with me, folks. So the first thing I'm going to do is share the deck that I've prepared for you. This will take a couple steps right here to do. And then either you or Jack will need to let me know in the chat if you can see my screen and only my screen, and perhaps a little tiny bit of my face as I share some of this content with you. So let me know. I don't see an answer yet. Will you get slides? Yes, Susan, you will. There's, once again, I'll just repeat for those who are coming in a little bit later, we will be sending an email to you in the next 48 hours. That'll come from DonorSearch, I should say, that has a link to a recording as well as to this slide deck I'm about to share with you. And then after that, there is a handout I've put together that has many more materials, so far beyond the 26 that I'm mentioning here today. So how many CFRA credits can we apply to this webinar? It's 1 hour, so it's 1 credit. And that's true for this entire series, that everything is 45 to 60 minutes, and it lets you get a credit each single time. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. It looks like you can see what I'm showing. So there we go. I'm going to start with kind of a silly question. And it begins with, of course, framing this entire conversation about what this is about and what it's not. So this is not about what you see on the right, but I'm going to ask you anyway, just for at least demographic context, what those images are. So this is a quiz. So what's the first one on the far left? Anybody? At the risk of sounding like I'm the teacher in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Anyone? Anyone? Anyone recognize that? Hal. Yes, it is. Hal from Hal 9000, even better. Thank you, John. Yes, and it's from 2001. For anybody who looks back at the Stanley Kubrick film. If you haven't seen it, kind of a classic. What about the image in the middle? If anyone here is old enough to have watched that when it first came out, you win a big, big prize today. Anybody recognize that? Yes, and Jack, you haven't seen it yet, but you will. That's right. It's the robot from Metropolis, Fritz Lang's classic. It's really the first film that I think that framed AI in this kind of contemporary terror context. which is, of course, the next image on the right. I'm sure you all recognize that one. So what is that? Terminator, absolutely. That's Arnold without his skin. Now, what about on the lower left? This is for the hipsters among you. Yes, there we go. Megan and Hunter, thank you for spelling it the way they do in the film. I appreciate that. Megan, who now has 2 Megan films. So if you need to get scared, watch that. And then what about in the far right? Bottom, yes, thank you. You got it first, John, and Ashley's not far behind with Ultron. So if you're a Marvel fan, you'll see I relate to Marvel here and a couple of other things as we jump along today. So that was just for fun. Now, what are we going to explore together? How AI is rewriting the rules of fundraising, the promise, faster research, smarter research, outreach, rather, bigger results, the perils, especially slop, which I'm going to get into next, as well as donor distrust and ethical landmines, just touching on these things, because I don't want this to all be at 30,000 feet. I want to jump right in on that trail with you. True stories of AI wins. We're going to do a lot of those, and near disasters from the field. How to lead the charge with tools that serve your mission instead of replacing it. This is not about replacing you. I know I shouldn't need to say that anymore, but it's really not. But it is about making sure that we're using these tools in a way that's productive. And then finally, in light of this AI jungle here, the uncharted road ahead. That's what we're tackling. Excuse me. This action figure is, of course, like almost everything in this presentation, AI generated. So if you want to make a mini figure of yourself, you can do that. If you want the prompt for it, you'll have to write to me separately. But this is my real life action figure with some of the things that represent who I am. And no, that's not a ukulele on the bottom left. It's just small because that's how they make these things. So yes, Frost on fundraising, trying to change the world. Poetry is a part of my world, and that's a cup of tea, not coffee, but that's the best AI could do. So I am the host of this series, as probably most of you know. We've been doing this program. It's at 742 programs. It's now 745 since 2016 in our launch, reaching about 125,000 of our friends and colleagues out there in the field. We have 3 shows per week. That's what you're going to find over there on the DonorSearch site and on their YouTube channel. And I've been in this field for a long time. So much of what I'm going to share, once again, is information I've learned from the guests in this series, the work that I've done, and especially from our colleagues here on this webinar with us today, which is why I'm a big fan of the chat as a way to share with one another. So my work specifically has been starting as a grant maker at the National Endowment for the Arts, and don't break my heart asking what happened to that, a fundraiser in various institutions, including International Rescue Committee, Meridian International Center, et cetera, working as a consultant, especially in capital campaigns. I'll refer to that when we talk about AI use and doing feasibility studies and so forth. And then serial social entrepreneur and a content creator today with you. Now, first thing I want to mention about this topic, and that is supposed to look like me, isn't it interesting how I have 3 arms, is that this is one of the dangers is not just the Terminator danger, right, of potentially, Cyberdyne systems making robots that take over the world and force us into submission, or the Matrix or something like that, but rather just the slop like this that's created by using AI, and AI being just a dumb tool. I mean, it's genius that we can use these things, and they rapidly accelerate everything we do from research to execution in so many ways, but it also does much of it very, very bluntly and badly. And so that's one of the primary perils, is actually producing things that are not human. What we used to in the old days of discussing technology described as the uncanny valley, or things that seem kind of human, but then you just have this almost revulsion, almost the gag reflex to some of it, because it just doesn't seem right. And this is a real issue with especially generative AI. So we'll get into that probably in the next couple slides. Slop, what is it? It might be defined as irrelevant, shallow, biased, or inaccurate data. By the way, another generated image here, this one is supposed to look like something. Anybody know what that might look like? It is a reference from some animated films from Japan. That's your first hint. I'm not going to play 20 questions. Anybody have any suggestions for what it looks like it might be from? Because it's not really from the movie. Spirited Away. Daniel wins. There we go. And Jay is close behind. Yes, and in fact, I just asked for it to generate images that looked like Miyazaki and described what was happening in the film, and this is what I came up with. I didn't go through the process of generating an image after image until it got closer to the original, because I wanted to see what would happen and wanted to share with you what happens if we're not particularly careful. But it is interesting how close that image resembles the one character, a Miyazaki character, and maybe not the pigs, the parents in the film, but the girl. And this is one of the central fights that we're not going to discuss much today, but it's the way so much material has been digested from the internet and from real creators, authors, for example, and then it turns into things, and image makers, and turns into things like this, which closely resemble the originals, but are clearly not the originals at all. So what is the potential risk of slop? That without strategy, oversight, and a human-centered approach, and by that I'm thinking when we are the ultimate arbiters of what that truth is that we're trying to communicate to other humans, that AI can produce generic results, amplify bias, and erode trust, which is the biggest part, because trust is the currency of philanthropy. Or as a friend in the field who's one of the best fundraisers on the planet, who's raised billions, personally billions, has said to me many times, quite humbly though, is that philanthropy moves at the speed of trust. So AI helps accelerate us, but if it erodes trust, it actually slows down our progress in building relationships and generating revenue. So we have to use these tools judiciously and with an eye towards ensuring that they do not erode trust. So the problems we face and a growing body of solutions. What are the problems? What are the solutions? And then we'll get into those individual cases. So I promise this is the most you're going to see at 30,000 feet. We're going to be diving right in. And Jack was just asking, was this generated with ChatGPT or a different one? And yes, so absolutely, that one I think was generated through ChatGPT, their image generator. But and Ghibli Studios has sued some company for generating images trained on their work. Absolutely, and I don't know if they sued OpenAI, which is the parent of ChatGPT, or the others, or all the above. There's a lawsuit now going on among a whole bunch of authors against all the primary AI producers because of this very issue, that they didn't ask for permission before they digested all this as training data, which is something I'll get back to with the way we use the information. Because when we utilize it, we have to be very thoughtful about the fact that it's quite likely that, especially when we use any free tool, but we have to be also careful about using tools even that we pay for or under license, that we are in fact training the models. So we have to be careful what we feed in, because while it may make what we do better, it also runs the risk of providing information that can be utilized by the AI for lots of purposes for many other people, and that may not be our intention. So anyway, the problems we face and the potential solutions. On the problem side, giving and volunteering are in long-term decline. We know that. It's gone from around 75% when I started in the field to around 49.6% or lower of people who are giving, and even fewer who are volunteering. Donor retention is at historic lows, less than 20% in many cases. Just think about your own donor retention at your organizations. We're relying on bigger gifts from fewer donors. That seems like a great thing when you're in a campaign and you're successful. It's pretty scary when you're not in a campaign, or you don't have those donors, or you don't have that big drive. Margins are shrinking as costs rise. Think about the way it is in healthcare. If anybody here is in healthcare philanthropy, you definitely know what I'm talking about, because your margin at the hospital may be 2% or less. And that means philanthropy is critical. And so if we lose trust, or we don't build these relationships with the bigger donors, or we don't have people, or a large percentage of our people giving, all those things are a problem. So in this environment, fundraising teams are asked to do more with less. We automatically rely on tools that are AI driven because they are really, really great tools. But we have to be careful, again, about how we use them, as we'll see in a sec. So the advantages, just to state the obvious, it's advancing exponentially, faster, smarter, more accessible, and cheaper every single day. And users don't need to be tech experts. And that's even true for creation of everything from apps to coding. And AI can help us be faster, more focused, and if we use it carefully, potentially a little more human, as we'll see with something called agentic AI later, where it matters most. I'm going to just touch on this slide quickly and then jump into the examples. Why is this accelerating? If it's not obvious already, because there's a data explosion from CRM and patient systems. What do I mean? Right now at your institution, inevitably, you're using something that catalogs all the gifts that come in, the relationships that you have. Whether it's Excel or you're spending $1 million on a system that's integrated throughout an institution, you are maintaining, I hope, data on your customer and donor relationships. So now a lot of those systems have some AI element that helps to mine or utilize that data more effectively. There are breakthroughs in user-friendly AI tools, which we'll be looking at in just a moment. So that's helping us to all jump into this, not just ChatGPT, but everything else we use, from Netflix, frankly, and Amazon, through to the tools that you're going to be using to generate videos, as I'll show you examples of in a few minutes. And one will be generated from this presentation, probably within the next day. Strained team capacity. Increasing demand for AI-driven solutions to automate tasks is really pushing a lot of us not only to use those tools, but also to bring people into our offices who use them more effectively. And personalized donor expectations. This is a big one. Again, the relationship with people and trust is huge. And if we can personalize our donor communications, it's more likely people will give more. Or in other words, we solve the retention crisis. The problem here is if we just send out a digital receipt when people give, we show that we don't really care. But it takes a lot of time to write all those handwritten notes and to do all those other touch points, which show that we really care. AI can help us to do that, but only if we do it in a way that really personalizes things. It doesn't just automate the systems. This cannot be like in this classic Charlie Chaplin movie. I have Charlie Chaplin behind me, so I thought of that. In modern times where he's working on a conveyor belt, or maybe some of you have seen a classic I Love Lucy episode from the 1950s or 60s where she's trying to pull chocolate off the line and she ends up eating half of it just to, not fly into the machine. These kinds of problems that we have with using automated tools are that we strain our own capacity or we strain the tool's capacity to do the work. So I'm going to show you examples of how we can avoid that. They generally fall for most of us today into two categories. So let's define those. One is predictive AI. The other is generative. And I'm going to take a side glance at the chat and see if there's something there that I'm missing. And Jamie has said, when adapting to donors being in long-term decline, is the goal to appeal to a wider audience? I love this question already. A wider audience for smaller, but more consistent donations, or investing further in continual donations from larger, more capable donors, or would you optimize AI strategies for both? This is a great question, and I'm not going to presume that I have the ultimate answer here. And I'd love others to chime in. I'll tell you where my heart is on this, which is that if we have 100 people helping us, that they love the same things we do, that they care about the same issues we do, and we either just talk to 100 people in the same way, or we only talk to 3 people in a really special way, and then the other 97 just get the same communication all the time, if any communication at all, I think both of those are a failed approach. But it's what most of us do, primarily because we haven't had the time, the resources, and the plan. We're going to be talking about all those things today. But I would like to think that AI, to answer, Jamie, your question, is a tool set that will enable us to rethink our plan and the execution of it so that we can start treating people as humans. And that means everybody in our file, so that we won't just focus on just the top 2 to 3%, which is mission critical, because without their revenue, without those relationships, deep relationships and revenue, we will not succeed on the big goals, the transformational goals. But if we don't think about the other 97 people, or more likely the tens of thousands of people who have made a small gift and are waiting for something other than the digital receipt and wondering why we never wrote it, not knowing how busy we are, if we don't start treating them as something other than disposable, they will not come back. That's our donor retention problem. I think we have to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time in our field. And I love our field and I know how strained we are, and I feel it too. We've got to use these tools in order to do better. So hopefully half of you won't walk out now that I've been on my soapbox. Anyway, but I do think it's possible. And I'll tell you some of the reasons why I think so now. So first, predictive AI, what is it? And then what is generative AI? We'll just do this fast since the terms are now known to most of us. And this is a generated image, once again, to show the kind of the cliche about the analytical side of the brain, the creative side of the brain. I'm not a neurologist or a neurosurgeon, but I don't really think that's true. But it is helpful as a device to help us think about these things. Predictive is really about forecasting and looking at large bodies of data, say what might happen based upon what has happened. And then that can be done dynamically, as we'll see in the examples I'm going to illustrate in a second. So that means not just a canned model that you developed a year or 2 or 10 years ago, but instead one that is constantly fed with information about how our activity and the donors or friends or volunteers' activity tells us a new story every day. That it's like a reading the equivalent of a magazine or a really dynamic blog or something like that, or even Instagram or TikTok, where the story is constantly changing rather than just one story which we keep relating. So it can be quite dynamic and predictive, but it is looking at the vast body of data to help us with those predictions, which is something we can't do no matter how smart we are. We need that assistance. Generative is that supposedly creative piece, or in other words, generating images like this one, large bodies of text. It could be helping us to scale our outreach and development. It could be helping us to create emails and video and images and all these things. So the difference might be, what will happen in the future, or what could I say or create? Now, how does your organization compare? A little quick quiz. So get ready to type in the chat. Let's compare. This is AI adoption in nonprofits in 2025, just a quick snapshot from earlier this year. So are you exploring AI tools? Just go ahead and say whether or not you are. Yes. Okay. Now, presumably most of you are, which is why you're here hanging out with me today. And that's good to see, because 85.6% of us in the field are. So that's good. You're in good company. That was an easy one. They get a little harder as we go along. Have you adopted an AI already? That's a little different, right? So exploring is one thing, using it is another. So what do we think? Somewhat. Yes. Okay. Oh, a little more hesitancy here in the chat. No. Yes. Not really. Somewhat. Somewhat. Yeah. This is kind of understandable, because 66% of large nonprofits, but only 34% of those under $1 million are utilizing it right now. And there may be a lot of reasons for that we could discuss. Do you have a formal AI strategy? I'm almost terrified to look at the chat when you answer this. No, 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 no. Of course not. 24% do. 1 out of 4 of your friends. I would say this. If there's only one use you get out of a generative tool this month, try doing some planning. It won't have the right plan for you exactly, but it gets you started. Can you imagine if you walked into the next roundtable meeting, with all your colleagues, and you were talking off a plan that you generated together instead of the thinking just in terms of what we did last week and what are we going to do next week? AI can really help with that strategizing. How are you using AI? How about grant writing and fundraising? Anybody? And it's good to see some people here like Mary Jane reacting to that specifically. Thank you. Sherry, stewardship, and Ellen, definitely. And Mary Jane, again, grant search. Sure, absolutely. 60% are using it for that purpose. This is really happening a lot now. In fact, I don't think I have their name in the presentation. So this is one of the 26. Is Grantable is one of those tools. And I just talked to another person just a few days ago who has another tool coming out that not only helps in the grant writing, but pairs you with the foundations that might be of interest to you, and then helps you with the grant writing. And then finally, I talked to a person in a session last week, Andy Carey, who said during our frontline show, we have a database of 6,000 foundations that we maintain through Candid. Anybody can utilize it with us. So there are lots of ways of getting at that. Content marketing. Anybody using it for content marketing? If you know what I'm talking about here. Editing, yes, yes, okay, a little bit. My go-to use is polishing social media captions. This is Ashley, grant applications, emails, collateral, meeting, transcribing, meeting recordings. Yeah, that's everywhere now. It would be one of the 26 suggestions. In other words, if you use right now something which is Microsoft Office, or you're using Google, or you've got any of the meeting apps, they have an automatically generated piece. In fact, I saw someone who logged in today is using Fireflies, and that's just generating text. And I'll show you another example of that soon. So, but only a third of us are really using it for content marketing. So we'll look into that more. And then predictive analytics. This is where we're going to look at all your data and we're going to say, this is the people that you should focus on and how much to ask for. And then we keep changing that day after day after day as you keep feeding the AI, because it's constantly learning. So wow, Paulina is saying 100%. I don't know if you were saying that to that. If so, that's pretty amazing. And other people, not yet. No, I want to though. Sure, of course. This is a bigger investment, whether you're doing it internally or you're doing it with an external firm. I'll mention some firms that do it, but only 12.8% as of the time of this study, which I think was around March. So lots of stuff there. Thank you for participating in this conversation. I really do appreciate that. Now, here are the barriers to this implementation. I don't know if it sounds familiar to you or not, but capacity constraints. So, you know, if 43% of us only have 1 to 2 staff managing IT and AI decisions, and that's a lot of decisions, because when you think about it, we don't do anything now without IT involvement, whether we call it that or not. Only 30% of small nonprofits have the budget to do something, that they think they have the budget to do something serious with AI, and ethical concerns. And this is a biggie where data privacy, security, and bias are significant worries, and people haven't written a plan that they can execute and follow so people will follow it uniformly, which is so important here. And then finally, the formal AI strategy, that just, we don't have it. If 76% of us don't have it, 24% of us do, 76% don't, then that's obviously the biggest barrier of all. Now, early adopters, I put this image up because I wanted to see if I asked beautiful.ai, another one of the 26, what image should I use for early adopters? And they gave me animal adoption. This is why AI without human intervention is just hilarious and ridiculous. So I hope you like the cat and the dog, but we're not talking about that right now. How are some nonprofits using AI right now? Universities, ChatGPT for Giving Day content and predictive scoring, 2 ends, right? That's on the one side, the generative, and the other is the more predictive. Hospitals for grateful patient prospecting. Absolutely. We'll talk about that. Independent schools, automating prospect research, which you have to do very carefully because the information can be very wrong. What they call hallucination, politely, or in other words, just making stuff up. Arts organizations generating campaign visuals, very helpful. But having a good designer to oversee that is like having a factory manager to make sure that that car is actually assembled in the right order so it drives when it leaves the factory. National charities, sentiment analysis, and donor segmentation, very important in the big charities. I don't know if anybody here is from some of the big ones, but that can be really, really important. So let me give you some concrete examples. And again, you're all getting this slide deck, so if you tune out for a second as I'm jabbering, it's totally okay. The first one's from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, which implemented a predictive AI tool, in this case, DonorSearch AI, and I'm going to use a lot of different examples. This is not all a DonorSearch presentation, okay? Don't worry. To improve donor prospecting and stewardship, starting in 2024, they began leveraging AI-driven modeling to continuously rescore and update each donor's likelihood of giving with every new data. That's a typo, clearly, but new data that they were getting every single day. And this provided dynamic prospecting results that they could use then to identify high potential donors, not just high giving donors, but high potential, including grateful patient families that might have been overlooked. For those of you not in in healthcare or who are in healthcare but still concerned about the use of this in relation to HIPAA, I would say talk to some of these institutions that I'm now referencing about how they ensured that information which is inappropriate, this kind of personal identifying information, was not exposed to AI and was not exposed to anything that through that modeling process. So in other words, they did things the right way. They did them ethically, but then they also did the other thing that I think is important to do, which is they went and talked to people whose lives had been saved. They didn't talk to the doctors necessarily, unless that was a natural part of that conversation where people self-disclosed. But they didn't look at a vast body of data and say, show me the cancer patients or something like that. Rather, what they did was they looked for other kinds of indications according to people's behavior, not clinical behavior. So I'm just mentioning that because while I'm neither an ethicist nor a specialist in HIPAA, I think that all of us should be very attuned to those issues, and we can talk to our colleagues exactly about how to make sure that we do things properly. And the AHP is coming right up in a few weeks. So if you're very curious about that issue, talk with these folks there. Anyway, the result for CHOA was more efficient outreach, gift officers focusing on the best prospects, not just yesterday's prospects, but tomorrow's, saving staff time while boosting contact rates and donor upgrades. Another example like this is Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, or CHOP, as it's frequently called, excuse me, where the advancement team piloted AI techniques to enhance donor targeting and direct marketing. There, the AI-driven engagement scores enabled CHOP to segment lists, yield an 85% increase in direct response rates. That's why it's in bold, and that's the most important part of this slide, as well as a 25% higher average gift size in one campaign. Very important stuff. I have links in each of these. Those will be not only here in the presentation, but they will also be in this document that I give you with all these things afterwards. So you don't need to remember all this. Boston Children's Hospital Trust is another fun one. Here, they used GiveZ's version 2 virtual engagement officer initiative. This is where they wanted essentially a virtual gift officer powered by generative AI to cultivate and steward a portfolio of 1,000 donors. This is potentially really scary if it's not done well and supervised especially well. But what they found by doing this carefully, thoughtfully, and according to their policies and plans was that the first cohort of organizations set the virtual engagement officer, the VEO, in other words, a virtual, an AI, on a path to raise 1 million in gifts by mid-2025. I am not making an argument for getting rid of development officers and replacing with AIs. That would be the silliest and most ridiculous claim ever. What I am saying is, to go back to Jamie's point, there must be a way of treating everybody in a way that's special. And this is an early stage version of getting there. University of South Carolina used AI to successfully leverage a Give for Garnet campaign. This was way back in 2023, and presumably they're still using this methodology, and more Giving Day campaigns are doing so. If you're doing this, it'd be very interesting to see. And in fact, we can see this was a note from Mary Jane. I should have read this earlier. For higher education, FERPA is also a major concern. Absolutely. I should have mentioned that earlier. And in fact, that would be true right here as we're bringing up a university. We want to be very, very mindful of the laws and the ethics that apply to the work we do, and ensure that data is not being exposed in places where it should not. But that doesn't mean that we should not use these tools. It's the psychological barrier as much as a technical one that ends up being a problem for us. We need to interrogate these things carefully and supervise them carefully, but it doesn't mean we don't take action. And these are just clear examples of how some institutions have done so. And you can always share notes with them, just as we're sharing notes with one another today. So what happened there was that they used 2 full-time staff members and in their annual giving office. So I love this application. It's not just major gifts. To save staff time and generate 392 personalized appeal letters. That's the key, personalized appeal letters from university deans, which required minimal editing and streamlined the campaign. So no more just one letter to all people treating, and I'll go ahead and I'll slam my university because they do well and it doesn't matter. University of Michigan writes me so often about the football team. And I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but I have no interest in football. I went to one game in 4 years. It was too cold. It's cold in Michigan. It was at the top of the stadium. It's not my thing. I wasn't going to sit there and freeze to death. That's just not my thing. I had a lot of other interests. But if they write to everybody about football, it's just not going to appeal to me. So the idea of having personalized appeals from people who are interested in the same things sounds right. Imagine if it were your teacher, your dean, somebody, a student from who graduated in your program who was writing and telling you not only would you support, but then after you did, what the impact was on their lives. And then finally, these VEOs, the virtual engagement officers, are examples at William and Mary and College of Charleston as well, where AI-powered chatbots boosted donor engagement. This is again a GIVSY example, but there are others. And all of this will be in your slide deck. Prospect identification. What do we have here? Engine, a nonprofit organization, utilized AI tools to identify and engage potential donors, resulting in $900,000 raised in 6 months in 2024. This was using tools from Evertrue. And I do have something from Evertrue I hope to show you in a minute, so I won't belabor this. And now, what does AI do well for prospect development? Well, plenty. It accelerates data processing and pattern recognition. That's the predictive piece. It generates content drafts. That's the generative piece. It scores prospects by gift likelihood, but it does it dynamically, not just according to a model from the past. And it analyzes sentiment potentially and optimizes outreach. And I'm going to give you examples of exactly that in just a moment. This is something I've done a lot of, and we want to be thoughtful about how we do it, but you can do this as well. If I record an interview for a case statement, because I usually look at a whole bunch of material and then I will also interview several people, I always ask for permission to record an interview with someone for creating a case statement. And then that information is usually automatically transcribed, just like Fireflies is transcribing one of our folks here today, and probably for many of our meetings. Mine is transcribed automatically within the services I use. I usually use Otter for that purpose, otter.ai. Zoom, which we're using today, often has the capacity to generate a transcript. For that matter, YouTube can generate transcripts. So I just always ask for permission. And then if I'm going to then feed that into another application like ChatGPT, as I've frequently done, I will anonymize some of the text and then feed it in. Why am I doing this? Well, if I'm writing a case statement, first of all, it has to be as much poetry as prose. In other words, it has to be appealing to the heart, not just to the head. But I do want to learn from everything I've read, and I'm not going to remember it all. And I definitely want quotes from people. And I want to get their sentiments exactly as they stated them. So if I have 5 or 10 interviews, I can feed them through, again, anonymizing things that are key details that I don't want fed into this model, even if I am licensing it and paying for it. And then I can have it, then I can ask it, interrogate it, questions about what are the emerging themes here? What are some of the things that people are all saying? And then use that to start drafting. But then I never use what is drafted in these tools because it can be just terrible. So then I will use that to inspire me to think about what is the real story here that brings all these people together now that it's been framed for me and digested. And then I can then use the AI or the generative tools to suggest some things that I might have missed. And then I will rewrite those because once again, the writing itself is what is frequently described by people who write as purple prose. It's full of adjectives that we don't need. It's full of superlatives that we don't want. And it certainly lacks the poetry that we all expect. But it does dramatically accelerate the process of doing things like case statements and feasibility studies, as long as we use it in an appropriate and ethical manner where everyone knows what's happening and we remove and anonymize material that might otherwise expose people to this process. There are other novel uses for AI too. One thing we do here is, of course, we create a podcast. This is we do that every Friday. We're just interviewed Brent Grinna, and that's dropping, we hope, tomorrow night. But one thing you can try just for fun is Notebook LM. And if you haven't done it yet, just give it a try for fun. This lets you do something like this. You can go in and take your own website from your organization. load in the website, right? That's all public information. And then just ask it to tell you what it thinks of the website. It does a quick digest. Sometimes it's very helpful to have another set of eyes. In this case, it's an AI evaluating what's in there, telling you what the chief themes are, and it's creating things like a study guide. But also, it will generate what is the funniest podcast you've ever heard, where it will have two people, very smarmy people actually, talking to one another about the website. Why would you want that? Because sometimes listening to things is different from writing things or reading things. And while it is sometimes annoying to hear these people talking to one another in this way, it also lets you know how other people, if they were reading your website, reading your document, looking at comparisons of various documents, might interpret them if they were talking to one another and you were just overhearing it. Another thing that's really fun is using the storytelling capacity of tools like Opus Clips, which is something we use here. It's one of a number of tools that let you take a video, as we will do with this, drop it into Opus, and then generate up to 20, 30, or even 40 short form clips that are easily portable to platforms like Instagram, LinkedIn, or my gosh, what am I thinking of here? TikTok, certainly, and these platforms, and YouTube Shorts. So you'll see many YouTube Shorts in our series that are generated in part through this that Jack is using among his many tools, which really accelerates the process. It generates transcriptions, it generates subtitles, and it gives you lots of different choices. Why would you want that? Once again, let's imagine you've done a session at your charity. You've had an hour of people talking and telling these powerful stories. It's all public. It's just been on YouTube, but no one is watching it. I can nearly guarantee you that if you have an hour to 2 hour video that no one is ever going to watch, and you drop that thing into a tool like this, and you generate 10 key clips where people tell the story that made them cry, that you'll get a 10 to 100 time uptake on the people who watch it in short form. That's where people are now. That's what people want to see. And it lets us get past all the other stuff. And then if people are truly interested, they can still go to the long format content, written or visual. Advocacy uses of AI. This is something that either we're going to do or people are going to do for us, whether we like it or not. So this is a short video I can't show you today, but I have a link to it, where some people before PBS and CPB were totally gutted. Some people who just loved Sesame Street, among other things, created a video where you see the various characters like Big Bird here in the street panhandling because this is brought to you by the letter F for funding. And it was one way that people could create viral content. In this case, nobody from PBS, at least as far as I'm aware, but people who just cared about the same issue. So it brings up two questions. First, what is the capacity of these tools to generate this kind of content? The answer is very high now. Sora is one example. I think that's the one that was used this. Sora is the tool. Another thing is, if you don't do it, if you are not telling your story, somebody else will, which is one of the things about AI, which I think is quite important for us to consider. Now, what are the risks in all this? The risks of AI in fundraising are multiple, but I would say primarily privacy. We've alluded to this already. Bias, how training data has often, at least historically, especially with the first generations, favored wealthier, white, and older donors. I'm not trying to be glib here or politically correct. I'm just stating what I think we all recognize is true. If you take certain content and you feed it in, it learns from that content. If all you ever learned as a person was Ernest Hemingway and you've never read another book, then much of your thoughts about novels would be informed by Ernest Hemingway. So the original training data for ChatGPT was all prior to September 21. Things have changed since then, but still a lot of what they fed in was informed by that, as well as the algorithms themselves that were written by a certain cohort of people working in Silicon Valley, or better or worse. So there is a certain level of bias built into all of this, and we just need to be aware of it so we can adjust for it. Because our audiences are reflective of today and tomorrow, not yesterday. and over automation that we can neglect small and emerging donors, which I talked about before. Human disconnection. This is a big one. Things that can feel too slick, or it can be viewed as inauthentic as well as manipulative, which is a huge problem for emerging donors, for younger donors who want nothing to do with things that are just totally slick. And then regulations, coming compliance frameworks could potentially penalize misuse. Not necessarily in the US, where it seems like the idea is to move the goalpost 10 years down the road. But in places like Italy, where just yesterday and I think they enacted a law or they introduced a law to and make it so that AI had to be in compliance with certain things. And here I'm not talking about things that are clearly illegal, but rather other uses which are not permissible by the individuals who are included in that content. So be on the lookout for this, especially coming first from places like Europe and Canada, because they will eventually reach us here. Policies and procedures are huge. I hope I have time to show you this little video. I think I will, to keep us on the straight and narrow. I've referred to policies and procedures and plans a lot, but I haven't really shown you anything on it because I know that it would put everyone here to sleep. But don't fall asleep yet. This stuff is so important. There are a lot of questions that we need to ask ourselves before using AI. And a lot of these, like what is the data based on? Who might be harmed or left out? Is this adding or removing value? Would I trust this if I were the donor? That is a biggie. And am I still applying professional judgment? The question we should ask ourselves every day when we look in the mirror at the office or in our home office. These are things that are all addressed by a friend that I'm going to share with you right now. And if technology permits.
So I'm Michelle Hudson, and I'm the owner of 501 Consulting. I work with nonprofits and associations, and I'm addicted to volunteering. So I work as a consultant as well as a volunteer for a lot of organizations. And I love helping organizations with the higher level stuff as well as the infrastructure stuff. And so policies and procedures and bylaws and mission, those are really my jam. If you're thinking about doing a policy for like social media and just email policies and things like that, how to use the internet or how you're using the internet in general, then I think you really have to have an AI policy. You can't just have it as part of all the other things, as a piece of a social media policy. I think it needs to be a standalone policy because there's a number of considerations that are important that are specific to AI that you may not be able to address in some of the other policies. I think the first thing you have to do with an AI policy is figure out how you're going to use it. What are you going to be creating content, whether that's words or pictures or something like that? Are you going to be using it to analyze data? And I think you start with that, start with what the purpose and uses are for AI. And I think that will help drive some of the aspects of the policy that you write. Is you want to make sure that you deal with the main considerations, which I think are security. If you've got sensitive data or you have proprietary organizational information, you want to make sure that you're using reputable AI tools and that you're not loading a lot of information into those tools that might be used to teach the tools, that might be accessible in some way in the future by other people. So you want to basically clean your data, make sure it's, any personal information that could be tied to a specific person or to your specific organization. You want to make sure that you're putting in codes or something like that. So it would be donor 1, donor 2, donor 3, something like that. So that, and then of course you have a legend that you can go back to so you can figure out who those people are. But you want to make sure that you're not loading that information into the AI tool so that other people can access it, especially if it's sensitive or personal information. So I'm Michelle Hudson.
There we go. Sorry about that, folks. I understand that some of you are having difficulty hearing, and so I'm going to move on, but this will be in your slide deck, and along with a lot of other resources, including the one that I'm going to send you that's in a doc that I think I'll probably share with you on Google in order to make that easy to access. What I would say as we get closer to the end here, because I have a little more content than the hour will allow us to share, is that we have various paths that we can go as we think about the future of nonprofits in the AI age. And some of those seem pretty straightforward. You know, it's where we are and it's just going to make our jobs better. That's what I've been preaching here today. Hopefully that's come through. And I think it can be done responsibly. That's what they were talking about at the conference earlier this week. If you missed it, that content will be available to you in the form of recordings. It was the third annual meeting of fundraising.ai. A lot of that is at 30,000 feet, but there is some very practical information there and a lot of brilliant people who are involved in that organization. But much of it is talking about today and maybe a little bit into tomorrow. Let's think ahead. It's really important as we plan, as Michelle was pointing to there. She's a brilliant commentator, former APRA board member and a good friend. And as I hope we're alluding to now, there's a lot that we can predict, and it could go various directions. One is this kind of AI-enabled post-scarcity welfare state approach. Another is a hybrid plus guardrails, which is hopefully where we will go. But the other is that it can be used by bad actors for bad purposes. And this is one big way we can do it. And I'll probably be wrapping up in the next couple minutes on this topic, which is agentic AI. Now, before I was talking principally about two things, right? Predictive and generative, the two things that we see all the time, that we're living with every single day. But there's agentic, which is right here, right now, and it's coming very quickly to virtually everything we do. There are a whole bunch of players in this space, and some of them are increasingly people that we know. One is Wise. This is the stuff that's being done by Luis Diaz, who is the man behind a lot of work in fundraising these days. And he has a tool that's an AI assistant built specifically for fundraising teams. Another one is, as you can see upper right, is another tool in this space. Sintra is another one that that is not designed for people in development, but can certainly be used that way, which is essentially virtual assistants, but they're all virtual in this case. They're not in the Philippines. And then Evertrue, which has a service which I'm loath to share the video with you because it may be hard to hear, but I will point to, which is one that's designed around providing an agent that creates contact reports, something that I worked on years ago. For anybody who knows me, I had a service that did that with Helen Brown and with Bill Tedesco. Oh my gosh, well over a decade ago. And that was, now they have accelerated that. So they're integrating all these elements into a true AI assistant within the Evertrue environment. So now that's not to say that Evertrue is the only way to do this. It certainly is not. But I would recommend taking a look at the AI assistant from Evertrue, and I'll make sure there's a link to that content. It's from their product line called Signal in the handout that you receive, rather than trying to show you this video. But the video, which is only a couple minutes long, should inspire either internal work to develop these tools on your own to accelerate progress and to take some of the workload off the shoulders of the staff while humanizing and personalizing your communications with donors, but also bring all these things under one technical roof, which is a continual issue for those of us in development who are having to deal with 4 or 5 or 6 different things. So they've done it quite intelligently. And again, others will be doing it, but I take a look at it for inspiration, if nothing else. What are the other things that are coming along? Integrated multimodal donor intelligence. So what are we talking about here? Current AI models are siloed by channel. You know, you've got your email here, the wealth data over here, the events information over there, just like I was mentioning a moment ago. This multimodal donor intelligence piece is what I was describing, is what I'm seeing in that Signal piece from Evertrue. but it would also then integrate more information about the donors themselves, including things like donor mood boards, which I know sounds a little bit like mood rings for anybody who's old enough to remember those. But I think it could be important. If in the marketing field, in corporate marketing, people often talk about personas, and they tend to make them canned, and then they look for people who look like that. But where I think marketing has gone is to look for them much more dynamically, and donor mood boards or behavioral snapshots that can continually be updated might be one way to make sure that we're not just trying to appeal to tomorrow's donors in the same way we appeal to donors who looked like them yesterday, but instead are reacting to them in the current environment. And in this kind of very complicated donor environment today, which is complicated economically, politically, philanthropically, this could be quite important. So I see this coming imminently. Proactive journey modeling. This is where AI would not just predict a gift, but they would look at the entire donor life cycle and predict where they might go in the future. So we wouldn't be waiting for the 100 people that I mentioned before. We wouldn't be waiting for those 97 people to sort of self-identify, or to wait until there was an alert against their securities portfolio, or until they made a gift of $1,000 or decided to show up to an event. We'd be looking at lots of information feeding into the AI, and then be able to predict who might be likely to go on that journey themselves. Another one is AI for board and volunteer engagement. Why even talk about this here? I cannot tell you how many sessions I've done on boards in this series, not just this year, but every year, where people say, our board is not engaged, they're not asking, they're not giving, all these things. And then I'll talk to board members or people who work with boards, and they're saying, they're not engaging with me, they're not talking to me, they're not asking me, they haven't told me, they haven't brought me on board and done an onboarding session to tell me what I'm here to do. They haven't given me a real job to do. I don't know what to do. We've got to get a way to talk with our volunteers and board members, again, as humans, but also closely, personally. AI might be able to help us with that, because most of these tools right now are ignoring boards and volunteers, but we could take that information, do it ethically. Again, as Michelle said, and I alluded to earlier, take that in and use that as a way to score and match talent with campaigns and forecast activity, not according to what we need to raise money for, but what we think the board members are capable of doing with us. And we all know that volunteers can be our best donors. So this is one way to accomplish that, by using these tools to make sure that we're optimizing board performance by using tools like engagement dashboards that are focused on them. And then finally, conversational AI for high-touch fundraising. These are these agentic AI pieces that I mentioned that some people already started using a year and 2 years ago. Some of the tools I just referenced a few minutes ago, where people are pre-qualifying potential future major donors and using emotional intelligence in order to conduct discovery interviews. This is not something we are prepared to cede to AI today, but it is something I can easily imagine as it becomes better and we become better stewards of it, that it will enable us to do across a broader spectrum of individuals. So we stop ignoring the vast majority of people. I've done a fair amount of feasibility studies for campaigns, and one consistent element is we can only have the time and the budget to interview so many people. And so we inevitably just interview the people who are already most engaged and already have the highest capacity. And that works. It helps us to raise more money. But what about all the rest of the people who are our future? Having an emotionally intelligent AI tool to conduct discovery might enable us to really accelerate that process. I think I'm going to stop right there and say that we really need to look out, because AI is learning to escape human control. So we've really got to exercise some control as we use it. And that starts with our own planning, our own discussions within our offices. And it also starts by making a decision not just to ignore these things, but to use them in a way that's thoughtful. So magical thoughts to end with. It's not the tools, it's how we use them. AI won't save or destroy fundraising, or anything else for that matter, but we will. So what I would suggest is that we think about little, old Lindsay Wagner here. I'm not going to ask you if you know who she is, but some of you in the audience will recognize that face, and especially her ear. What generative and predictive and agentic can only pretend to do right now, but could potentially do better with us in the future is, yes, Paulina, thank you, is be like the bionic woman and exercise a skill that I think most of us have in our field in the nonprofit sector, which is the ability to listen first, to listen more, to talk less, to preach less, to make it more about the donor, not because we are the slaves to the donors, but because by being in partnership with them and by really knowing where they come from and how we can work together, we're going to raise more money and do more good. And so we can really lean into that. And these tools will help us, but we can do that alone. We're the human in the loop. So AI can elevate that role, but we're going to bring the judgment, the curiosity, and the empathy that comes mainly through our ears. And in the end, it's not replacing us, it's releasing us by offloading repetitive tasks, surfacing insights faster, personalizing communications at scale, hopefully sparking some new ideas even for old dogs like me when they're writing a case statement, and reducing some stress rather than adding to it, as long as we recognize that we're in charge. And the AI can help us to work smarter, but not harder, as long as we keep our hands on the wheel and our pedal on the gas. And that is not dictated by the technology, but only by us. That's it for me. I've kept this over a little bit today. I don't know how many of you I kept you with me as I did that journey, but I want to thank you for letting me do kind of a special edition here and encourage you to feel free to reach out to me if I can be of service to you in any way as you think about this AI journey. It's a lot of fun to be on. I'm going to just go ahead and bring myself up on screen in case anybody has a last minute thought or question. And thank you all for being here and having this discussion with me today. I'm going to take a look in the Q&A and just see if I missed anything. Will I share the recording? Yes, I know that sometimes people come 30 minutes in, so I'll just say one last time that the recording and the slide deck will be shared with everybody by email. And there will also be an additional addendum that has all these resources and lots of others that will come to you. So I hope you'll enjoy all that. And I hope you do one more favor for me and for us and for everybody who's here with you today and everybody who watches the recording later. And that's to simply fill out the survey as you leave. That's really one of our only measures for knowing what you want to see and hear. And by the way, I take your names out. I take your suggestions in. I run those through AI and I look at it every single week. So what you see in the future is a byproduct of my mind and your suggestions to give you the content that you tell me you want to see and hear. And I hope that's a good metaphor for everything we should be doing in AI and fundraising today. Thank you all very much for being here. Join us again this Friday for a session with Brent Grinna in the PM podcast. You can listen to that wherever you listen to podcasts. You can join us next Tuesday on Frontlines of Social Good for the news and views of the week and the biggest gifts of the week and interviews with newsmakers. And then next Thursday, we have another session in this series, How to Raise. So check all that out on the DonorSearch site, if you would. Until then, take care, everybody.